Welcome back to Bisexual Killjoy, the place where we know bisexuality isn't a phase, it's a phenomenon. I'm Bailey, and this is
Jace.
In today's episode, Too Much and Never Enough, being a bi plus woman, we're struggling with what it means to not just be a woman, but a bi plus woman. And for this conversation, we'd like to ground ourselves in Simone de Beauvoir's quote, "One is not born, but rather becomes woman." We're talking about the violence of gender expectations, the false solidity of biological sex, internalized misogyny, and how bi plus women are made, not born. But before we take that plunge, Jace, what's in your Killjoy survival kit these days?
Taking a nap.
Oh, that's so real.
I just finished with finals. Honestly, I am feeling the exhaustion of the entire semester just kind of like crash on like a wave.
Yeah.
So I am actively taking my time to rest, take naps, relax, cuddle up with a cat in order to recharge and keep the work sustainable. So taking naps.
Oh, that is very good advice to me, and I hope that I heard it. Okay, so in case this isn't clear, we are not a safe space for TERFs or trans exclusionary anyone, for that matter. I honestly didn't feel like we needed a disclaimer for the Bi Plus Guys episode we did in season 2, but there are so many more folks out there concerned about preserving the sanctity of whatever womanhood means. But allow us to say something that might freak you out. Sex is socially constructed. That's right, folks. Chromosomes, genitals, and hormones are more than just cold, hard facts.
They are facts, but facts that are interpreted through social meaning. Sex, what we understand and call as biological sex, isn't even one single characteristic. It's a web of characteristics and traits. Chromosomes, genitalia, hormone levels, bone density, muscle mass, height, voice pitch, all of these come together to form what we understand as quote-unquote biological sex. But these vary wildly across individuals in every direction. Statistically, sure, men tend to be taller than women. But when you meet a woman who's 6'2", do you say she has a man's height? No, she's just tall. Unless you're insecure, in which case, then maybe you do say some asshole shit.
But it is asshole shit. Let's call it what it is. Okay, so the idea that sex is fixed, binary, or absolute, now that is a social story. And when you're bi plus, especially if you're, say, gender nonconforming, people get real mad that you don't fit into their neat little spreadsheet.
So let's go back to de Beauvoir's quote. "One is not born, but rather becomes woman." De Beauvoir's The Second Sex is a classic text in feminist studies. Published in 1949 for the first time, she tackles many key feminist questions, including what it means to be a woman, who gets to say that they are a woman, and the kinds of contestations that occur when the woman's body is seen as the primary site. It's a dense, extraordinarily French philosophical text that has gone through numerous translations, and, of course, these translations have needed extended revision as the very first English translation was done by, you guessed it, a man who cut away just far too much of the main text in an effort to, quote-unquote, synthesize. Though, by following her clues, we are able to recognize that becoming a woman isn't a single isolated fact. It's a process, a socialization, a practice of exclusion. You don't know what it means to be a woman until you're told what you're not allowed to be, what you're not allowed to do. Womanhood is always framed as lack. You're not strong enough, not logical enough, not detached enough. And if you are, then you're too much, too aggressive, too ambitious, too sexual, bossy. You've taken something that just wasn't meant for you in the first place.
Yeah. And we're not just shaped by the outside world. We internalize these rules. Critiques from our mothers, regret from elders about us not being born boys, the tomboy who was celebrated until she got tits. These are the stories that etch themselves onto our bodies. You become a woman by learning what to suppress and being punished when you fail to do so. Okay, so there are a lot of stats out there about bi plus women. We've talked about them a lot and do not feel compelled to talk some more about our high rates of depression, anxiety, mood disorders, substance use disorders, domestic violence, suicidality, poverty. I could go on. There is so much more to us than that. What does it mean to be a bi plus woman? And a bi plus, just like a femme person, someone who embodies femininity. What does that even mean?
Somebody who's not ashamed to own up to their femininity, who enjoys it, who is comfortable in it. I think that to me, being bi plus and a woman has been a life story full of dismissal. Dismissed because I'm too feminine or not feminine enough, too improper or way too proper once I learned the scripts. Too young to be in a space, too loud because I'm Puerto Rican, too messy, too undecided. I think that the main struggle that frames our existence as bi plus women, at least for me, has to do with our consent and our agency being constantly violated and then being told that it's a privilege or a compliment. The sexualization of women is a profoundly uncomfortable experience for most of us, if not all of us. And being bi plus at the same time means that sometimes that sexualization is actually the best you can hope for.
I know we've talked about this a little bit on the show in the past, but what age did you realize that you were bi?
I came out when, I think at 13 in high school, told my mom. And my mom was like, "Are you sure you don't just like admire women though?"
Mom. Mom.
There are similar moments of like realizing that you're a woman too, or more like realizing that you're not a boy.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say that I started to actually like gain a clear understanding of what that meant with school uniforms. I went to the cheapest private school in the area. That was also a Christian school. So girls wore these little like dress jumper things and the boys wore pants. And I always wondered why I couldn't just wear pants. They looked so much more comfortable because the boys could run. The boys could sit cross-legged without being like told to make sure that they were all covered.
I think for me, the first time I recognized that I was different than boys. Oh, that's hard. That's a hard question. I was definitely a tomboy, but like we kind of discussed in the gender episode, my mom didn't really raise me to have a concept of like what is womanhood, because she's like, you got to be able to do everything yourself. And for a long time, I didn't realize that there was anything that I wasn't allowed to do or couldn't do. My brothers got signed up for flag football and I was like, I want to play. And I got signed up for flag football. I was the only girl on the team. I didn't like it. I just wanted to do it to feel included. But I guess it wasn't until high school when I noticed that boys were getting more validation for their contributions to a conversation, even if they weren't smart, than the girls did. And the smart girls were like busybodies or they were brown nosers. I'm like, what is this? What is this double standard?
You're so bossy.
Yeah, you are bossy. I got called bossy boots when I was younger. I'm like, I'm right. So I don't know what you want me to do about that.
If you just did things my way, you would see that.
It would get done a lot faster and more efficiently. Thank you very much. But in terms of bi-ness, I mean, I think I was aware that I had attraction to girls, but didn't have a language for it until I was in college and didn't outright call myself bi until I was a little bit further on in my early 20s. But yeah, I've always felt secure in both of those identities. Although there was a time when I was certainly like, oh, I'm not going to wear dresses. I'm not a girly girl. And I would only wear pants. And then weirdly, pendulum went the other way and I refused to wear pants. I was like, just dresses, please. Thank you very much. Like, why are you dressing like a 40s housewife right now? I was really on that pinup cusp. Like I was going to be a pinup girl, but it was too expensive. Like many of my interests, just too expensive for me to get into.
I was raised in a house full of women, just women. So in my head, men, except for my immediate uncles that I actually spoke to, were some sort of fiction in my head.
I've never met a man. Do they exist?
Yeah, like except for my dad and my uncles, it was, and I mean, this paired with everything that I was actively being told growing up of, you know, be afraid of guys, boys only want one thing, and me totally being so oblivious. What in the world is that one thing?
Yeah, what do they want?
I think that I probably felt the distinction really sharply because I was a really smart kid, as all undiagnosed ADHD kids, you know, test well. And I got jumped a grade in elementary. But then as we got closer to middle school, my mom was asked if they wanted to jump me up a grade. And my mom told me about this after she and my dad had made the decision to not bump me another grade. And I remember asking why, because I was so massively bored. and I couldn't handle the boredom. And my teacher started taking it out on me.
Oh.
Like if I fell asleep in class, they would assign more classwork and tell the kids not to wake me up, et cetera, telling me to put away my novel because I can't be reading my novel while the other kids are still finishing their tests. I remember being so sad. Like, Mom, why didn't you just bump me so that I could actually learn something and do something interesting? And she had said, oh, I was told not to, or we were encouraged not to, because you wouldn't be at the same development stage as all the girls.
Oh.
So all the girls would be talking about, presumably, right, in these adults' imagination, about bra sizes and about finally getting their first period, et cetera, and I would be left out.
Everyone grows at a different rate also.
Yeah.
That's not the point. Sorry. I'm just like, wait a second. Like 9-year-olds can start menstruating. My titties didn't grow in until I was like 17. And then they really grew in.
So I think what in my parents' head, they were trying to protect me from the kind of bullying that comes with picking at kids because of their physical characteristics. And I don't think that any of that really internalized for me. I was so concerned with having fun and reading and learning. And I do think that all of my guy classmates were very encouraged to have fun. And that probably wouldn't have been a big concern had I been a boy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think jumping me would have been the biggest concern. So to Simone de Beauvoir's point of one is not born, but rather one becomes, I think that my own process of becoming a woman and that training and that socialization came actively through that lens. It was the only wearing skirts for school. It was the, you have to make sure to wear like longer shirts. Remember that I was wearing like really long shirts for the longest and I wasn't sure why.
Yeah.
Until like later in my teen years, my mom was like, well, you know, it was just to like make sure that people wouldn't look at you weird. And I'm like, I was a kid.
Well, there's a predatory nature to that. Young women are expected, like, you need to cover yourself so you don't tempt anybody.
Absolutely.
Do you think that's where that was coming from?
I think so. Probably less to do with having it be my own fault and probably a lot more to do with the fear of something that I constantly heard, not just from my family, but also like friends' family and so on, is little girls not being allowed to stay, to have sleepovers or to stay at sleepovers and stuff. And the reasoning that I didn't understand at the time was, oh, there's a husband and a brother and one never knows. We never know.
Yeah.
Which I don't want to dismiss as a concern, especially now that I understand a little bit more and how many of these things are kept so quiet. But I know that at the time, I didn't understand. All I knew is that I wasn't allowed to do things, fun things, that my friends got to do or that the boys got to do. I just think that that overall sucked. Because in my house, all women, that wasn't a thing. We could all do the same things. But what about you, Bailey? Like growing up with brothers, did you notice any differences?
Well, again, I was with my mother most of the time where it was just me and her. And had that same sort of woman solidarity. They can do anything. All of her friends were women. Like, I never saw men at my house. It was a very rare occasion. But when I was at my dad's house, the expectations were definitely different. It's like, Bailey, you can't change out here. Bailey, like, close your door, lock the door, make sure that your dress is this low, and it's police your body.
Yeah.
Basically. Like, your body is a wild thing that needs to be policed. And yeah, it made me feel self-conscious. All of a sudden, I was kind of like, oh, am I something to be contained? Is there some poisonous aspect of all of this stuff? Yeah, there are definitely differences in how we were treated too. It's so weird because my dad would talk about what women are supposed to do. Like, women are their husband's helpmate. And then simultaneously never fucking treated me like that.
Yeah.
He always treated me, I felt like, as a son. I was instructed on how to take care of myself. He taught me self-defense. He taught me how to take care of weapons. The only reason I didn't go hunting and fishing with him is because I was not interested. But he would have if that was something I wanted to do. So it was like this cognitive dissonance. You're being treated like a boy, but you're a girl. And also I have all of these thoughts about what women should do and what women's work is. And I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to do with any of this information, Dad? And I didn't feel weird about it until I got older and would talk to all of these other women who are like, oh, well, again, grew up in the South. Oh, I just can't wait to be a wife. I can't wait to keep house. I can't wait to have kids. And I'm just like, what's that like? I'm like, yeah, I guess I should also just marry and settle down with a nice girl like you. So maybe that says something about my psyche. Sometimes I think a part of my brain is perhaps a little androgynous in the fact that it's pretty masculine. And whatever that means, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about femininity and masculinity as we go on. But yeah, I saw differences. Both was treated differently and not treated differently. Like, is that why I'm bisexual?
Maybe. I'm trying to think about other like hallmark experiences of womanhood. I do have this one story that I always come back to as what I would want a friend to do as an actual ally. I'm pretty sure I've spoken on here to all of our listeners about how I started in mechanical engineering and how I wanted to revolutionize air travel once upon a time. So I was a part of the IEEE chapter at my undergrad college. Don't ask me what IEEE stands for. I don't remember. Something about engineers.
Okay.
And we had like a little room, a little office where we used to spend most of our time. And we were talking about sexism. It was just me, my best friend who happened to be a gay guy, and one of the people who was on the board of the organization. And I remember saying, well, the IEEE is actually a really sexist place. Like, I'm surprised at what I've been experiencing here. The guy that's on the board says, no, I don't think that the IEEE is really all that, like sexist. My best friend interrupts and says, I think that the person who should talk about sexism in the organization is the only woman in the room.
Oh, T.
And the board member shut up. Mm-hmm. And I remember being able to actually breathe and feeling like I could take up space because I kept being pushed aside in favor of conservative rhetoric, in favor of really anything, because I was a freshman and I was a girl, so I shouldn't be speaking too much in the space. That was what engineering was for the entire time. So when I left, I felt like I could actually breathe, and I felt so grateful that I could talk about sexism and be taken seriously in a sociology classroom and an anthropology classroom, rather than continuously be told by other guy members that no, the org isn't all that sexist, really.
Thanks for your skewed data, sir. So as we talk about womanhood, I think it's complicated, but I agree with de Beauvoir that it is a becoming. We just finished recording with Alicia Ortiz for the episode that comes out after this, but we were talking with her about utopias. And some folks seem to think that a utopia is one in which gender and sex do not exist, but everything is egalitarian. And I don't necessarily like the idea of that. I think it's really dope that people inhabit a spectrum of expression, femininity and masculinity, that yin and yang situation. That's the spice of life. And if it was all just like beige and boring, I would not want to live on this planet.
Yeah. What doesn't sit right with me about utopia in a lot of ways is that I feel like it implies sameness. It implies a kind of gray where like, okay, everything is just going to be gray from now on, fun. And that could be because my first introduction to the term was that one like Charmed episode. I don't know if do you know what I'm talking about?
I was not a Charmed girly.
No?
No.
Oh, I was. I've rewatched that show a gazillion times. So for those of you who don't know, and for Bailey, oh my God.
You got to educate me.
There's this one episode of Charmed, the OG series, where a utopia is superimposed. And if I'm remembering right, the utopia for them, what really means is that magic is no longer hidden. It doesn't need to be a secret anymore. Everybody is living in a world where you can practice magic freely. Everybody's accepting and whatnot. But in order to accomplish a utopia, they need to erase all emotion, all strong emotion. All grief, excessive joy. You can't feel anything at the edges. So everybody's just chipper the entire time and everything is the same. And that is utopia. Every day is the same. That means that there is no conflict. That means that there is no excessive joy. Everybody's just perfectly chipper the whole time. And something about that rubbed me way off. I mean, I don't need to tell you why, because that sounds weird. And I think that ever since then, every time I come across the concept of utopia, there are definitely ways to use it and I engage with it conceptually. But at my core, I'm still brought back to that place of You mean the place where nobody feels, the place where nobody's different?
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like the place where nobody's different.
So perhaps that's why bi plus women are so special, is that we embody so much liminality. And I think both of us would say, like, that's a type of magic.
Heck yeah.
But that being said, bi plus women are treated, I'll say poorly. Bi plus women are treated poorly.
Yeah.
Because of the liminality that we represent. We have talked about this a lot this season, I think, where the liminality is a threat. Your intersections are a threat. The fact that you upset the tidy spaces of what queerness is supposed to be is a threat. For our bi plus women and femme presenting folks listening to the show, maybe you felt this way. You go into a space, you go into a queer space, and you are treated like an ally, an interloper, or, you know, sometimes you might have a nice experience. We're trying to complain a little bit less, but I'm sorry. And sometimes you have a nice experience. But yeah, why do you think that bi plus women specifically are kind of maligned?
I think it has to do with embracing femininity and the rejection of femininity broadly.
Mm-hmm.
If womanhood is framed as lack, that which a man is not, then very broadly, femininity is very often shameful. It's a shameful thing to exhibit. And I think that being proud or being comfortable and joyous in your femininity is largely confusing, because why wouldn't you complain about heels? Why wouldn't you complain about wearing bras? Why wouldn't you complain about all these things that come with becoming a woman?
So let's pause and define what femininity means to us in this moment.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. It's a big question. Are we looking at feminine in the traditional philosophical sense where it is reception, receiving, softness? Femininity is the sea. The sea can also be violent, but it is very itself. It's natural. It doesn't chase. It just becomes over and over and over again, as opposed to masculinity, which is about going out, taking, making things. You know, fire and water are a classic way of those being depicted. Femininity, I think, in this conversation is also about, I don't like daintiness as a word.
As we continue to grapple with femininity and defining womanhood, the reason why, and I want to share this with all of our listeners, this has been a discussion weeks long of defining these terms. The problem with getting to them is the fact that they are defined by a lack. How do you define, conceptualize womanhood when the only answer that comes up is, well, not a man, well, certainly not strong enough, certainly not.
When I think about femininity, I think about the Rider-Waite Empress tarot card. It depicts a woman on a throne holding a scepter. She's got a crown. She's got a very pensive look on her face. And there's just like prosperity behind her. Just full, overflowing fields of wheat. And to me, I'm like, that is what fucking femininity is. It is not needing, everything you need is brought to you. You rule with quiet dignity. It's like, it's quiet because I'm confident. If I needed to raise my voice, I would, but I never have to raise my voice. I'm understood. And I'm just like, yes, how do I channel this? This is what I mean by femininity. It's not, I mean, femininity can be gentle. It's just so complex. Femininity is such this beautiful, complex creature. It's alive.
I love that idea of femininity as magnetism.
Yeah.
I definitely feel very tied to femininity as this inner knowing that when you are pulled back or when you are in a lull, it is because you're about to spring into something beautiful, into something magical. In that way, very connected to nature.
Yeah.
To engage in a revival and a rebirth that is continuous over and over again.
We talk about cycles, and women are very connected to cycles of all sorts, you know.
Yeah.
When you think about femininity in the world, are there people that you think of that embody femininity?
This feels like such a stereotypical answer. I always go back to Anne Hathaway in Princess Diaries. I definitely grew up wanting to be a princess. And I definitely mean practicing the waltz in my living room.
Mm-hmm.
So when The Princess Diaries came out, and I have both DVDs and I am obsessed with them, I would rewatch them all the time, precisely because they kind of go through all of these like little rules and things.
Mm-hmm.
It is especially because at the end of Princess Diaries 2, like Anne Hathaway, spoiler, but that's old enough that there's no spoilers, is there?
Should I put in the show notes? Sorry, spoiler about Princess Diaries 2.
When she decides, I'm gonna rule on my own. I'm strong enough. I've seen my grandma do it. That's really what comes to me. Grace and power and quiet authority, and still having all of that alongside the clumsiness, alongside the disaster, and learning from those disasters.
For me, it is Miranda Priestley in The Devil Wears Prada.
I've never seen The Devil Wears Prada.
Oh, you would love. It has Anne Hathaway in it.
Right.
but the idea that, Miranda Priestley is the editor at It's Not Vogue, but it's Vogue.
Mm-hmm.
She is a force of nature. When she walks into a room, people put on high heels. She commands the weather in this room. And yet there are a few moments throughout the movie where you see the vulnerability, like her ability to be vulnerable, even if it's kind of against her will. But it's just like nothing about her is ever fucking bothered. And she's like, I know I'm going to get my way because I always get my way because I deserve to get my way. And
Absolutely.
I'm just like, you're a monster and I want to be you when I grow up.
And when we start approaching femininity from this space of magnetism and a kind of quiet, secure authority that doesn't need to be too loud, though at times it is.
Yeah.
It is about skill, and we're going to keep talking about threats here, that can be really threatening to the powers that be.
Oh, it absolutely is.
As we will expand more on our next episode. When I think about elite capture when it comes to gender and gender expression, I think of how the right has co-opted these terms of divine feminine and divine masculine
oh my God.
to mean such weird, twisted things.
Yeah.
And it's like, buddy, I have questions.
And to the point that like a trad wife, a person, a woman stays home with the children as the homemaker is like the feminine ideal. Oh, there's a literal term for this and I'll think about it later. The woman is the moral compass of the household. She's the one who rears the children. She's soft. She's gentle. She never gets upset. She always meets the needs of folks in her care. She's perfect, right? She's the Madonna. And it's a right shame because there are plenty of folks out there who are like, I would love to be the caretaker. I would absolutely love to be the nurturer and the hearth keeper and stay at home with the kids and make my partner dinner every night. But you kind of get a little bit of side eye in liberal spaces, even though feminism says you're allowed to choose what you want to do. It's like, okay, but is that all you're going to be? Is that all you're going to be? It's like, yeah, that's all I need to be. And I feel bad that the alt-right got us. They took it from us and we can't have it back.
And it really sucks that they take these terms from us.
Yeah.
They take the concepts from us. And then they also rob us of our joy in experiencing that. And I don't mind sharing with all of our listeners that I did struggle so much to write this episode because every time I wanted to say, hey, this is what I love about womanhood. This is what I love about being connected to my mother and my grandmother before her. Like, I feel like I sound like a conservative person, and that's not... And you all know what I mean when I say that, but at the same time, there's a kind of fear in there of like, well, what if my joy is actively misinterpreted or there's an active misreading?
Yeah, but this is because if the right weaponizes femininity, then the left completely devalues it. In order to be a good feminist, you must strip away your femininity. To be a good queer, in a lot of instances, unless you are a drag queen and you're performing femininity, but you're not embodying it all the time, you're being a bad queer. You're being a bad feminist. You are doing a disservice to the entire movement. You should figure that shit out.
It permeates our spaces. Like, I've definitely experienced WGS classrooms, feminist spaces, queer spaces, where, I mean, it's tacit, but the endorsement of male opinions and masculine opinions way higher than anybody else.
Yeah.
It is... in a lot of ways about perception. I think a lot of bi+ struggles and gender struggles as well happen in the realm of perception. It is those who are perceived as more masculine for X or Y reason that they are given that authority too.
Yeah.
They're given that leverage. And those who choose to actively embrace the femininity and are read as feminine or mostly feminine. It's like, what I'm trying to say is that I'm very tired of being talked over in WGS and feminist spaces by masculine presenting folks.
Well, if you butched it up, I'd take you seriously. No.
I have so many mixed feelings about the amount of button-ups I have in my closet.
Look, I actually talked about this recently with some medical students, and they were kind of asking me, how do you find yourself perceived in queer spaces? Which was a really good question for a medical student to ask me. And I said, well, sometimes I feel good. I find that when I really, really femme it up, and I'm in my stilettos, and I'm in my dresses, and I've got my makeup on and my hair done, people don't take me seriously. Or they're surprised by the fact that I've got something intelligent to say. They're like, you're so beautiful. I'm like, yes, let's talk about bi plus health and equity. And they're like, oh, like, yeah, oh. But because of that, no, that's not true. Sometimes I do dress more mask to go to queer events so people take me seriously. I put my combat boots on, I got my jeans on and my little cuff and some type of tee and maybe a denim overlay if we're feeling freaky. But it's like, oh, I feel femme most of the time. Why am I dressing like this? And it's so people let me in the club and take me seriously.
Yeah.
Fuck that. Now I'm mad.
Yeah, it sucks.
So there's no way for us as bi plus women to be right.
Well, in the same way that there's no way for a woman to be right, period.
Just wrong. Everything about you is wrong.
Yeah. We're also seeing that with the level and degree of conservative backlash where you're a woman first. The important part is to gain control over your reproductive organs. The important part is to take away your right to choose. The important part is, police everything about you and what you have access to so that you stay quiet. And it sucks. And that's all I gotta say. That really goes back to my original point of how so much of womanhood really does feel about dismissal.
Yeah.
If I talk about womanhood and being a woman in gender in sociological terms, then I feel like the only thing I have to say really is, well, being a woman is about being dismissed.
How do we survive? How do bi plus women survive in a society that dismisses them and polices them and tells them constantly that you are wrong?
I would say what you've been saying this entire podcast project, or what we've been sharing together, which is find your community and find your people.
Well, I mean, yes, do that, listeners. But also, Jace, I mean, what do bi plus women do outside of this good advice? Like, what are we accused of? We're accused of
bringing straightness
Yeah.
into spaces where straightness doesn't belong.
We're told that we're straight passing.
Or that being sexualized is a privilege.
Yes. And when bi plus women fuck cisgender dudes, they are supporting the patriarchy. They are suffering from compulsory heterosexuality.
Okay.
Is that how you say it?
Now, before you flip a table.
Okay. There are too many. Look, my tables aren't going to survive all this flipping that's been done today.
I imagine that many of you listening in have heard the term compet or compulsory heterosexuality. And there is a wild misreading of, Adrienne Rich's Compulsory Heterosexuality, the essay. The misreading that tends to go about the internet goes along the lines of compet is something that you suffer from. It is something that it is imposed upon you, which is not untrue. That you are actively experiencing the effects of. And I tend to get pretty angry at the misreading in the interwebs because it is a take that is often used to dismiss bi plus femmes in particular. Because as the rhetoric goes, as the myth, the story goes, bi plus women are really just lesbians experiencing compet. We just are refusing to acknowledge that we don't actually like men. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
First and foremost, don't do Adrienne Rich dirty like that. The essay is a lot better, and I'm a lot less mad at the essay than I am at the internet's version of it.
Yeah.
Second of all, actively dismissing or suppressing our affinities is not liberation.
It's policing.
It's gatekeeping.
Yeah. It doesn't help the community whatsoever. And the result of that is a lot of bi plus women in relationships with cisgender men will say, I'm a lesbian except for my husband. Or I wish that I was a lesbian. I wish I didn't like men. And it devalues those relationships that we have. Like, I'm a cisgender woman and I'm married to a cisgender man and he's dope. Yeah. I love him so much.
I love him so much. Richie's amazing.
Richie, you are amazing. Thank you for all you do. But our relationship doesn't make me any less bisexual.
Of course not.
Our relationship doesn't make him any less bisexual.
Absolutely not.
So because we're both bi, does that mean our relationship is more queer? Does it mean it's more legitimate? The answer is no. But sorry for leading the witness, everybody. But that's kind of the vibe that it's giving. It's you're only queer, you're only allowed to the party if your relationship dynamic matches what queer society has claimed is appropriate.
And going back to the misreading of texts, I do think that it is that search for palatability that is another profound misreading of queerness and embracing alternatives or rejecting norms. And you can actively reject norms and reject heterosexuality, the institution, TM, while still being in a different gender relationship.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a thing. I've said it before, I'll say it again. You do not need to be in a same gender relationship in order to have a queer relationship. I highly recommend listening to or reading Jane Ward's Tragedy of Heterosexuality for more notes on how heterosexuality is an institution, that the very premise is actually that women hate men and men hate women.
I think just everyone hates women.
That's true.
That feels more true.
Yeah, yeah.
Just given how womanhood is treated in every space that you go in, just about. There are some spaces where womanhood is really fucking celebrated, and those are nice spaces to be in. It does feel like everybody hates women. And that's why when we were talking about at the top of this episode, if you're a TERF, get the fuck out. But the fact that I felt the need to preface this episode by saying, when we're talking about women, we're talking about like everything women encompasses.
Yeah.
And it's because people are far more interested in policing the idea of womanhood, the sanctity of womanhood, than they are in doing that for men.
Mm-hmm.
You will see 10 times more comments about you'll never be a real woman than you will ever see in a trans man's like you'll never be a real man. They still happen. Don't get me wrong. But womanhood looks a certain way. And if you don't look like that, I mean, just, was it last weekend before here in Boston? Those cisgender women were kicked out of a bathroom at the Omni Hotel, I think, because they're like, men aren't allowed in here. And they're like, I've got an ID. I am a woman. This poor lady is just like fucking horrified. It's because she's got short hair. She looks like a woman. I don't know what kind of peepers the worker had, but he's determining what womanhood is. And that to me is just makes me want to scream. Why are you so fucking concerned with what womanhood is supposed to look like? And are you basing it on what you've been told womanhood should look like?
That is so constructed.
Yeah.
And it is so outside imposed. And we hinted a little bit at the internalized element of sexism and how much that affects us. And to that extent, all of the hate and the dismissal that the world throws at us, it is important that we don't actively internalize misogyny so much that we throw it onto ourselves too.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is especially true for being a woman and bi plus, because sometimes, and I hate to say it, we buy it. Like, I've bought it before. I've bought into passing privilege before. Mm-hmm. I've thought, well, maybe bi women are more accepted because there is more TV representation.
Where? What TV are you watching?
At the point. Because they never say that they're bi, do they? They're just, the villain or trying to prove something. Yeah. I don't know. It's always for the male gaze, and that is not a privilege. And I think that it's important to remember that actively trying to convince ourselves that we have it better, that it's all good, that it's all okay, that we need to be smaller and make space for others is a kind of internalized misogyny that we can't give into.
Yeah.
The world throws enough at us as it is. Really so done with the world.
I am.
And I'm going to throw another table.
I don't own that many tables. I feel like it's important to also talk about intersectionality for bi plus women, specifically in how bi plus womanhood intersects with race. And the thing is, Black bi plus women are simultaneously hypersexualized and then whatever the opposite of that is when you're desexualized. Yeah. And it's like how to exist in a cognitive dissonance like this. Because as a bi plus woman, I'm really used to being hypersexualized. Like, oh, you're bi, that's really sexy. I'm like, is it? Is it really sexy? I don't think so. But I don't have that other side of it. I don't think ever in my life have I not been sexualized. But when you are like, you're desirable and not desirable, it's like, fuck, what does that do to your brain chemistry? Statistics say it's not good stuff.
No, not great stuff. I think that I'm brought back to a modern Charm episode. Now I'm talking about the Netflix adaptation. There's a moment where Macy says, in that kind of environment, you had to solidify the kind of minority that you were going to be. And she says that in relation to an ex-classmate, another Black woman who was also popular and decided to like be the one that folks could talk to and have fun. And she decided to double down on being nerdy, being smart, and knowing all the things. And I think that very often bi plus women of color are caught precisely at that intersection.
Interesting.
What kind of minority am I?
Mm-hmm.
I gotta stick to that. Those are the options.
As we wind down with this episode, I know we're kind of having this nebulous conversation around what bi plus womanhood looks like, feels like, acts like. But what are some things that we're really good at besides collecting earrings?
I think that we are really great at empathizing with others.
Oh, that was like an honest, sweet thing to say. I'm just talking about we collect trinkets.
I mean, we do collect trinkets, and I do love that too. But I think that amongst all of the great, amazing benefits that being so fluid offers us, I think that embracing femininity and bi-plusness comes with also being able to put yourself in each other's shoes and someone else's shoes to understand where they're coming from and to approach the world with curiosity, because we need more curiosity from each other.
Yeah, that's the only bi-curious that I will. That's valid.
Yeah.
Trinkets aside, I would agree. I think that bi plus women are incredibly empathetic. We can be very insightful. And I don't know if that's because most of us have spent a lifetime being hypervigilant and constantly aware of other people's emotions and trying to decide where do I fit into this power structure. You know, not great. But the benefit of that is you do have a lot of awareness and tend to understand where people are coming from or what they need. I'm sorry about your trauma, but hey, at least you got a cool t-shirt out of it.
It does kind of feel like that, yeah.
So we have homework for you. We haven't given you a ton of homework this season because we all have enough to do right now, and Survive is one of them. But for our allies, when's the last time you unpacked your stigmas, your misconceptions about bi plus womanhood? Not just bi plus womanhood, but womanhood in general. What do you think womanhood should look like, act like, sound like? Why do you think that? Is it true? And then same thing with bisexuality, plurisexuality, and then do it a third time with those two spheres met in a Venn diagram and check out the middle.
For our bi plus listeners, have you allowed yourself to take up space? Have you found your community yet? We'll always come back here. Finding your people, especially right now, is incredibly important. Make sure you build that little found community.
And if you don't have a bi plus community, if you check out the meetup for Boston bi events, there's a group there that will run a virtual bi plus women's meetup every other month. I was going to say bi-monthly, but it really is every other month. I couldn't do twice a month. Let that be your entry point. There are so many other bi plus people out there that it's just a matter of time and place before you find them. And to our LGBTQ plus organizations, do you have a bi plus women's support group yet? Why not?
It'll be a hit, promise.
It will be a hit. Even if it was the same 6 people going every week, that's a hit.
Absolutely.
In a queer space, 6 consistent people showing up to an event, thunderous applause.
Heck yeah. Thank you so much for listening in to Bailey and Jace's musings on what does it mean?
What does it mean?
To be a bi plus woman. We have shared various different angles on what it means to become a woman, our own different experiences with realizing, oh, darn, women are different from men, I guess, question mark. And what does it mean to embody femininity? And who do we look to when we hope to be our most powerful feminine selves? Thank you so much for joining us on this ride.
Yes, thank you for tuning in to Bisexual Killjoy, where we know that bisexuality isn't a phase, it's a phenomenon. To support us, share us with your friends, subscribe to our Substack, rate our podcast, preferably 5 stars. As always, we want to hear from you. You can share your stories with us on Instagram or via email at bisexualkilljoy@gmail.com. We would love to answer your questions in our advice column, Give It To Me Bi Plus, so check out the Substack for more details on that. And until we meet again, keep being a bisexual killjoy.
Stay bisexual and stay strong.